As a scientist, I can tell you that Sundays are only 24 hours long. But with NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV, you get every game every Sunday all in one place. That's upwards of 30 hours of NFL in one day. How can there be 30 hours in 24 hours, you ask? I have a theory. Magic. New users get NFL Sunday Ticket for 8 payments of $34.50 per month. Sign up at NFLSundayTicket.com. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games excludes digital-only games and commercial use. Terms and embargoes apply. Availability varies.
Vitamin Water Zero Sugar has great taste, zero BS, and obviously zero sugar. For those with zero room in their calendar. Zero patience for slow walkers. Those who get 0 hours of sleep on a Saturday night. Have zero filter, zero given, and zero interest in grabbing a plain, boring water. Grab a delicious Vitamin Water Zero Sugar today.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
Hello everyone and welcome to Howie the Podcast. It's Gav, I'm back, been away for a week or so. So this is the first time you've heard my dodgy voice in quite a while, but I'm back to chat all about Sunderland. Today is Tuesday, of course, and for once, there's not a great deal to talk about in terms of actual news. Most of these pods I've done over the summer, we've either had games to react to, a preview, pre-season stuff, transfers. It's all died down a little bit. And we're sitting around thinking, there's not much to talk about. But being the gobshites that we are, I'm sure we won't struggle to chat about Sunderland. There's a few things I want to go over today. Joining me, I've got Martin Wanless with us. Hello, mate.
Hello, Gav. Hi, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because we've had a summer of speculation and transfers and new players arriving and departing and all that sort of stuff. We've had all of the 3 games in the league so far. Lots to talk about with those. So, look, international football, it's not my favourite thing, I must admit. I haven't kept much of an eye on it, but there's obviously been an increased number of Sunderland players involved in those international fixtures over the weekend, and there's some more games tonight. And, there's tons to talk about in terms of players coming back from injury, the lineup for Saturday, who's, playing the way into that team, where these new signings who arrive on transfer deadline day sort of fit in. So I'm sure we'll manage half an hour or so, won't we?
Well, I never struggle to talk about Sunderland. I've just been at Asda, and I was even talking to people like who I know, like, to stop and talk to you and stuff, and then it's like, Wilson Isidore was in yesterday getting his shopping, and I got my photo with him, and I'm just talking. There's always something to talk about with Sunderland, isn't there? As I said, I've been away for a week or so, and actually I flew out last Sunday, and I was sat in departures at Newcastle Airport, and saw the big man sat there with his headphones in, Eliza Mayenda. So I thought, I've got to take this opportunity to go and have a chat with him. So I kind of went over, and before I even had a chance to say anything, he spotted I had the third keeper top on, the gold one with the black cat on and stuff. And he spotted that and sort of took his AirPods out and had a bit of crack with us. And I was talking to him, and he was actually on my flight out to France and was heading off on international duty. And I asked him, who are you playing? Like, because obviously I didn't know, and he didn't have a clue. He didn't have a clue who he was playing. And I was just thinking, like, can you imagine? Put yourself into his shoes, right? You're off to play for your country. He's off to play for Spain, under 21s level. One of the biggest moments in his career so far. He hasn't got a clue who he's playing against. I just can't understand that. He sat and thought about it for 10 seconds or so and was like, I don't know. Footballers are mad, aren't they? It's just a totally different species to us, lad.
Well, it's no, it is completely different, isn't it? And as football fans, we often know the last detail of things. But, it's like anything, isn't it? If you get into a work situation, which that is for him, right? You do your job, don't you? So you don't necessarily have to know everything. But I think some players will know absolutely every last intricate detail about what's coming up, and other players won't have a clue. And obviously, Eliza falls into the latter category.
Yes, well, he actually played an hour for Spain under-21s as they beat Cyprus 3-0. So I'm sure he found out pretty quickly who he was playing against.
He probably
good to see him in
Googled it
that
after
team.
he talked to you. He probably Googled it after he talked to you, didn't he?
Yeah. I noticed as well, looking at the team sheet for Spain, he played with Gonzalo Garcia, I think the name is. The lad who we were linked with over the summer from Real Madrid. He played up front with him, which is just an interesting little quirk. First name that jumped off the team sheet when I was looking at it. We've had players jetting off all over the place. Actually, also on that flight was Habib Diarra as well. And I had no idea he was about the place. And then the boarding information came up for us to go and head to the gate. And I was sat in the sort of the waiting area, and my end I got up probably a couple of minutes before I did. And as I went round the corner heading towards where the gates are at Newcastle, I seen him sort of like hiding round a pillar with his camera out, and I'm like, what the hell's he doing? And Diarra was sat eating a croissant or something, just completely like unaware he was being filmed by Eliza Mayenda. And then when he looked up and realised, they had a bit of a laugh and stuff. But yeah, so Diarra was also on my flight. I don't know where he was heading off to. But yeah, lads jetting off all over the place, it seems. I'm just looking now, like Shamsden Talbi apparently did quite well for Morocco, although he was on the bench, and they've qualified for the World Cup, I think. Alderete played for Paraguay. They've qualified for the World Cup. Granit Xhaka apparently had a very, very good game for Switzerland. I said Albania. For Switzerland, as they beat Kosovo 4-0. He played the full 90. Noah Siddiqui played the full 90 for Congo. They battered South Sudan away. I think Masuaku might have been suspended for that one. So he's actually... And as we record this, it's Monday, of course. But DR Congo, and Senegal play each other tonight. So Diarra will be playing against Siddiqui in that game.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I wonder if do you reckon they'll have a gentleman's agreement to leave each other alone? Like, yeah, we'll not hurt each other. We both got to play against Palace at the weekend.
You'd hope so, wouldn't you? You'd hope they'd have a little word, but you can just,
I don't know.
You can just see one of them knocking the other one, can't you?
Oh, well, this is going out retrospectively, so we'll know by then. So if anybody listening to this is thinking yous were the first ones to say it, then yeah, we're the ones with the bad juju. Diarra played an hour for Senegal as overcame Sudan 2-0 in Dakar. And it that adds importance to the game actually that takes place yesterday as people are listening to this, as it puts them 1 point behind Siddiqui's side.
It's tonight, Gavin.
Yes,
the game's
sorry.
Tonight.
Yes, the game's tonight. I'm getting me all my days mixed up here. I don't even know what day it is, to be honest. But yes, they play tonight. So I'm actually going to try and catch that if I can, because I'm interested to see what happens. Simon Adingra started with Amad Diallo for Ivory Coast and got himself an assist in their 1-0 win over Burundi. It was Vakun Bayo. I think he plays for Watford, doesn't he? Big striker for Watford. I think he might have scored against us last season. And was taken off with 20 minutes to go. Ronaldo Mandava played for Mozambique. They got battered 4-0 against Uganda. Bertrand Traore, he was an unused sub for Burkina Faso. They won 6-0 over Djibouti. And they also play tonight against Egypt, so he might get some minutes in that one. And tonight, again, Eliza Mayenda plays against Kosovo. So all of our lads in action. I mean, you mentioned it before. It's totally different to what we used to, this, isn't it? Having so many players playing international football. I think I counted 16 were given call-ups. It must have decimated the squad this week.
Well, it's been a lot, hasn't it? And, we haven't talked about Trey Hume there. Trey Hume was playing for Northern Ireland. Ballard would have been away if he... Do you know what's stupid about that, Martin? I watched the full game. I watched the full game against Germany because I was interested. I didn't have much to do, and I was just interested to see what the little battle would be like between him and that big lanky get that the Mags have signed. Yeah.
And him and Hume actually didn't run into each other too much because Hume played on the right of a back three. And I think the lad's name's Owen Toll, who plays for Bolton. I think he's Bolton's captain. It was him against the Mag striker. Is it Walder Matty? I can't remember his name. the mag striker got an assist, but it was a bit of fortune. Like that lad at the back made a bit of a mistake, a hash of it. But honestly, I thought he looked shite. I mean, I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot. Yeah, it plays against
Don't
Sunderland
say
as a
things
world or
like
whatever.
that,
But
man. Come on.
I mean, in this specific game, which has no bearing on any future performance against Sunderland, he looked terrible. He had a touch like a donkey. He looked like he was wearing Timberland boots. But Trey Hume had a canny game, and he was captain as well. And I know they lost, but you would expect a Germany team to beat Northern Ireland, particularly in Germany. So yeah, and obviously they felt the loss of Dan Ballard as we have. But yeah, I totally forgot about that one, even though I watched. It's probably the only bit of international football I've watched all week. Silly me. But yeah, it's that bearing it has on the squad that I'm interested in, because when you're Regis Le Bris, obviously you're used to losing players during international breaks. But I saw the training photos from this week, and you've got quite a lot of players left back. Enzo Lafayette was back there. Wilson Isidore, Brian Broby was training, which is good. Lucharel Gertruda, is that how you say it? That's my first attempt at that on this podcast, and I haven't been practicing.
Good to me. Yeah,
that'll do. I noticed you were avoiding it on the ones you did earlier.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, they were in training. I mean, it mustn't be good to try and prepare for a game when you're missing so many players. And bearing in mind, like, you've got lads playing Tuesday night. I don't know if we've got any players playing on Wednesday, but it's possible. I would have to have a look. But still, you're not expecting players back in Sunderland at best on Thursday, right? Thursday or Friday. And then you've got a game on Saturday away. So we'd probably be travelling on Friday. So they'll be down in the capital on Friday night, stopping over, play on Saturday. So it's almost like these players can't do any prep necessarily for Palace. It'll probably all be done the morning of the game in a meeting room somewhere in a hotel, just going through all of the very vague analysis. But then it's the same for both teams, isn't it? Because Palace will be affected the same way we are.
Well, they will. And look, it's not something that's unusual. Like, everyone's kind of used to that challenge. And obviously, the more international players that we get, the more difficult it is to prepare. I think the biggest difficulty for Regis Le Bris this week is you can't predict how players are going to come back, whether they're going to have a knock, whether they're going to be knackered, whether they're going to be mentally in the right space, whatever it is, And some of these players are traveling bloody thousands of miles to come back. And, the whole international football at this stage of the season is nuts. And I think actually this is the last year this September break is going to happen. I read they're going to combine the October break from next season into a 2-week international break. So you're not going to have this break after transfer window, which that makes slightly more sense to me, because to have this period, and also I just think it's nuts you go away after a game on a Saturday or Sunday, you don't play until the following Saturday in the main, and then you play on the Wednesday or Tuesday, and then you're back in league action on the Saturday. It should be the other way around. You should play midweek, play the Saturday, and have a full week to get back to your club. But look, it's obviously going to be tricky, and it's going to be interesting, isn't it, whether the players who stayed, if they're working on anything tactical or anything with a slight bearing on the Palace game, rather than just keeping fit and doing the regular stuff, whether they're actually prioritised in terms of selection, because there's been a number of players away, but, does the fact that Enzo Lafayette's been around the club all week, is rested, does that kind of almost guarantee him a starting place, regardless of anything else that went on last weekend, given that Siddiqui, Diarra, Granit Xhaka, Adingra, Talbi, Mayenda have all been away? That's all of our midfield and forward line. So look, it's kind of interesting to think about that. Then you bring in the other new players who we've the two Dutch lads who you talked about. Brian,
say their names.
Brian and the other fella. So look, you've got those two to throw in the mix as well, and whether they come into the thinking because the other players have been away. I actually don't think they will, and we can talk about that later on if we get the chance to.
Yeah.
But I think they'll most likely be on the bench. But regardless, it must come into your thinking in terms of how you're actually preparing for the Palace game. So it's it's going to be an interesting one to watch.
Yeah, I'm looking at the trying to work out kind of who didn't travel. So starting with the forward line, you've got Wilson Isidore, as I said before. Ahmed Abdullahi, who hasn't gone anywhere despite it looking like he would over the summer. Sorry. Brian Brobby, of course, is trained this week. Didn't get a Dutch call up, so he's in the squad. So that's 3 forwards who've been back yet. And then you think about that forward line. Wilson Isidore is going to be pushing for a start, given he scored twice. But there's 2 schools of thinking on this, isn't there? Because you've got the fact that Isidore's been training while the international break's been on. So, he's in Regis Le Bris's mind sight. He's there. And if he's trained well, you'll be looking at him, and we'll be able to do a lot more tactical work with Wilson Isidore than we will Elijah Mayenda, given he's not there. But then the other school of thought there is that Isidore's impact has came off the bench late in games, and are you going to get the same sort of impact from him if he starts? I mean, we've kind of seen this in the past with Isidore, where when he starts games, he doesn't have the same sort of impact on them, does he? So that's an interesting little tidbit there. Is the manager possibly going to look at that and go, actually, it's away from home, we're playing a tough team, I would like Wilson to come off with 25 minutes to go, maybe get us a goal that way, stretch their defence if we're winning, that sort of thing. And then on top of that, you've got the curveball which came on deadline day, which was Brian Brobby, who, for the money we've paid, has not come to sit on the bench. But I don't think, from what I gather, he's had much of a pre-season stroke start. I mean, kind of been in and out the Ajax team, had problems there. Obviously, when you move countries and stuff, there's a lot of settling in to do, and that'll have been useful for him, having just a week and a half or whatever it's been to kind of just get himself bedded into the team and all the other things that come off the pitch when you're a player moving across the world and stuff. But yeah, that's kind of interesting little caveat for me, because Mayenda's away, and Mayenda, to be honest, he's played okay, but he's certainly not guaranteed to start against Palace. So there's a lot to think about there with that front line.
There is, and I think this period of time with Mayenda being away and Isidore being training, I actually just think that strengthens Isidore's case to start against Palace.
Yeah.
I would completely disagree with you, by the way, about Isidore making more of an impact as a sub. Obviously, this season he has, because he's only been a sub. But if you cast your mind back to that spell between, September and January last season, he was starting every week. He was scoring goals. He went off the boil, and I think there was some personal things going on. But I think we've only seen this season really his impact off the bench. And look, Le Bris has talked, and I think it's really interesting how Le Bris has talked about the the starters and the finishers rather than the subs. People who can come on and finish off a game. And Isidore is that. Like, he's got the pace, especially when the games get a little bit sort of opened up towards the end. I think he's proven there that he can really add something different to the team. I think you look at Brian Brobby, and I did look on a YouTube video to see him say his own name, and I remembered it because it rhymes with Stephen Brody. I told Andrew Smithson this, Brian Brobby, Stephen Brody, so you can hopefully he scores more goals than Stephen Brody did for us. And look, he has not, as you say, he's not come to sit on the bench. He will be our number one striker in 6 weeks' time. So look, you've got this period of time here where really, like as I say, I think Mayenda's done all right. I don't think he's pulled up any trees. He's obviously scored a nice goal against West Ham. But when you look at his, I know people have kind of gone overboard a little bit on social media about his passing stats in the games, the number of times he's gotten the ball in games, but he's not getting involved too much. And look, we saw that last season from him when he plays up front by himself. He can struggle to really get into the games. And unless he comes deep, I think on one occasion in the first half against Brentford, he came deep on the halfway line, got the ball, picked it up, turned. And that's where his strength really lies. But if he's the one playing furthest forward, the opportunities for him to do that are a little bit restricted, aren't they? So I think Isidore's got a really strong claim to start against Palace. I think he's done really well when he's come on the field. And I think he knows where the goal is. He's confident. He's got a couple of goals. And look, him and Mayenda will be wanting to do their damnness to make it as difficult a decision as possible to put Broby in. They'll want to make Le Bris think twice about this, but the reality is, what did we pay for him? 25 million quid? He's not going to be a sub for very long. He's going to be given the opportunity to really prove that he can do a job for us in the Premier League and score goals in the Premier League. And as I say, I think it's nice that we've actually got an opportunity to let him settle in rather than him having to come into the first team against Palace on Saturday and be expected to score goals straight away.
Yeah, and not to turn this into a Palace preview, because we'll obviously do that later in the week. But when you kind of think about Palace as a team, they're arguably their strongest player is a centre-half in Mark Gay, and it's an interesting time for him because he was a Liverpool player. It was a piece of paper between being a Liverpool player and a Palace player, and it kind of felt a bit on the final day, and you wonder where his head's at, right? Being away with England all week. I'd be half tempted to chuck in Broby from the start, or Broby, sorry. Just because I look at the matchup and I think, well, from what we know about Broby, which isn't very much, given we've not seen him play for Sunderland, his biggest strength is his physicality and his ability to bully defenders and really give them a hard time. And I just think away from home, you're going to need an outlet. And I think it's been, to be honest, as much as I love Wilson Isidore, he's not an outlet, and it's been games away from home when you're humping the ball up to him where he kind of goes missing. So I'd love to know how ready Broby is, and we'll find this out, I'm sure, when Regis Le Bris talks to the press later in the week, because no doubt you'll be asked about him. But I just think if everybody was on the same level and everyone's the same fitness, I think he probably gets the nod. So it's probably a case of how ready they think he is. If he's come into training this week and they're looking at him, they're going, freaking hell, he can do a job already. I think, he'll play, even if it's just an hour of 65 minutes or whatever it is, I'm sure he's being considered to start that game. But like I say, we'll not turn this into too much of a Palace preview because we'll do that later in the week. But then look at
The family that vacations together stays together. At least that was the plan. Except now the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for this day.
This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like expecting the leadership of a team captain on the football field, but getting a sea captain. You wouldn't settle for just anything for your team. Shouldn't it be the same for your insurance? So don't settle for just any insurance when you can go with a leader. State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Deborah had to have surgery.
I had hip surgery in November of 2024.
Her United Healthcare nurse, Crystal, checked on her.
We do a routine call after surgery, and I could tell that she was struggling.
Deborah needed help.
My infection markers were through the roof.
And Crystal knew what to do.
I called the hospital and said she's coming in.
And got Deborah the help she needed.
Crystal and United Healthcare saved my life.
Hear more stories like Deborah's at uhc.com. Benefits, features, and/or devices vary by plan area. Limitation and exclusions apply.
into the midfield, since we've went positionally here, away on international duty, we've got Habib Diarra, Noah Siddiqui, and Granit Xhaka. So your three starting midfield players of the first 3 games have all gone away this week on international duty, and left behind were Dan Neil, Chris Rigg. Or did Rigg get called up for England? I can't remember now.
I think he did, didn't he? I think he did.
Not too sure. Maybe I'm not sure, but Dan Neil, Rigg, maybe Enzo Lefebvre, who we mentioned earlier, and then Harrison Jones. And those players, they must be in such a weird headspace right now because I've said this to people before, but if you're particularly Dan Neil, and we've talked a lot about Dan Neil over the summer, but how do you even argue against what's happening? It's so difficult. He can go and rap on Regis Le Bris's door and say, why am I not playing? But I don't think it's one of those situations where he can yet. It's not as though any of those players are going through a tough patch. They're all playing really well. We've brought them in for big money, particularly in the case of Xhaka, who's took Dan Neil's position. It's almost like, what are you meant to do? So this week in training, I bet it's been really interesting, kind of as an observer, to see who's really ramped it up this week and who's pushing, because they know they're not going to play. But on top of that, there is that possibility one of these players comes back from international duty and maybe has a knock, right? And you've got to be ready to play against Palace. Your mindset has to be, if that happens, I want to be the first player that Regis Le Bris thinks of, and I'm really, really interested to see how these players fit in, because at the minute it's tough to see where they go. But that's got to be the mindset, hasn't it? Be ready.
Oh, of course it has. And look, Dan Neil, I think it's a really interesting one because there's so many elements to it, isn't there? And I know we've kind of gone over this to some extent during the summer, but I do wonder how his contract situation impacted the club's approach to recruitment. Because, that's a huge thing. And, whether he stays longer term or not, I don't know. For him, I think it's almost, and it would be difficult, right? Because if you were captain last year, pretty much first name on the team sheet last year, to go from that to being not captain anymore and an unused sub in the league games, it's difficult. It's going to be difficult, and it'll be disappointing for him as a pro. The biggest factor in all of it is that he's 24-year-old and he's played almost 200 games for Sunderland. So in terms of games, he's actually a pretty experienced player. And given our sort of promotion of youth and putting faith in youth, he's had the opportunity to do that. Now, what I do hope, is that he signs a new contract, sees this season as the best opportunity for him to learn and develop as a player, to become a true Premier League player without having the pressure of having to be a pivotal part of a team that's, in all reality, is going to have a tough season. So I would hope that I do genuinely hope he signs a new contract, sees the opportunity to learn from Granit Xhaka, learn from the other players who've come in, and seizes his opportunity when one comes, because there's an absolute guarantee that there'll be suspensions, injuries. You got the African Cup over the Christmas and New Year period, which obviously we're going to lose a number of players for. Man, did you see the Echo's headline about Siddiqui and Diarra ruled out for 6 to 8 weeks? Clickbait.
Potentially ruled out for 8 weeks. I mean, it's technically true, but it makes you panic when you see something like that, doesn't it?
Well, it does. Your bloody heart sank. And of course, I gave him the click, so it obviously worked, begrudgingly. But look, for Dan Neil and for Chris Rigg, same situation. Slightly, obviously, Chris Rigg's a lot younger than Dan Neil, but he's played an awful lot of games for a player of his age. And I just hope, Rigg signed a new contract in the summer, so that's a little different. But, I just genuinely hope both of them see the opportunity to learn and develop. Because I do think that if, and again, we're kind of going over the recruitment stuff again, but if we hadn't done what we did in the summer, it would have been really actually unfair to put those players in as regular players for this season, because it could have been bloody demoralising for them. So, look, hopefully they've been training well. We know they're all good players who can come in and do a good job, and they'll be on tenterhooks really, because they don't know how Granit Xhaka is going to come back after the midweek games. How Talbi, how Siddiqui, how Diarra, all of these players, how they, as I said, they arrive back on Thursday night or Friday morning. Who knows what state they're going to be in? So they've got to be ready to go if we need them to. So it's just good to have that sort of strength and depth, really.
Yeah. Another little interesting pick out from the sort of training photos we've seen the last couple of days was that Luke O'Nine's back in training, back on the training pitch. I don't think he's in full contact training, but he looked like he was doing work with the ball. I mean, it was a shoulder injury, right? So his legs were fine. He's probably been going absolutely mad not being able to do full contact training. What Luke O'Nine's like, he's constant. And I'm talking about chance meetings with players. Had the little in down Roker Park last week, and he just rocked up on a bike on the day of the on the day of the Brentford game with his little ones in the back. He was out on a bike ride. You know, so he obviously he's got to be doing something all the time, hasn't he, Luke O'Nien? But you know, I seen him on the photos, and it made me think about his sort of role. And I know we've kind of talked broadly there about some of the other players like Daniel and Chris Rigg and all the rest of them, but I think specifically O'Nien's a very interesting case, isn't he? Because he's always been given this treatment from a section of fans, and maybe even, you know, this is a perception that people have of him outside of Sunderland, is that he's always had to fight. He's always had to. He almost been a little bit of an outsider in terms of the way people view him as a footballer. I remember when we were in League One, people saying he's not good enough. Championship, we get promoted, and people are saying Luke O'Nien's not going to be good enough for the Championship. And then he goes on to keep proving people wrong. So I think the worst thing you can do is write Luke O'Nien off. But the situation at the minute's very different, because had he been fit, he probably wouldn't have started against Brentford, but he probably would have started against West Ham, because we had to chuck in Jensen Seelt. Then we had injuries away at Burnley, so he probably would have played that game. So, you know, he's probably kind of kicking himself a bit, thinking, oh, bloody hell, you know, if I'd been fit, I would have played them games and it would have been my chance. And then since that's all happened, of course, he's out on the sidelines, recovering from a shoulder issue. We've went out and signed Omar Alderete, Ronaldo, Nordi Mukele, Arthur Masuaku, Luciel Geertruida. We've signed all these players, and some of them for big money, and with significant experience of playing international football and in top leagues in Europe and playing European football too, and winning trophies. In the case of, you know, Ronaldo, he won obviously the French league, and Nordi Mukele has been part of the PSG team that won the league. I think Geertruida was part of Arne Slot's Feyenoord team that won the Dutch league a couple of seasons ago. So these lads have come in, and it's a bit different to when you were in the Championship and you were in League One. And whilst O'Nien was still being written off by people, we were bringing in a far lower quality of player for him to compete against. And he'll be relishing it, I imagine. Once he's fit, he'll be thinking, I can't wait to train against these lads. I can't wait to test myself. I can't wait to learn from these players. But as a part of us just thinks, what's his role actually going to be this season, even when he's fit? At the minute, kind of feels like he's being used in the best way possible. So they're doing, you know, there's stuff going on with sponsors and with the club's social media. And I've noticed he was part of some videos the other day about the Foundation of Light. Kind of, they're using them in more of a sort of ambassador. It's weird, isn't it? Like an ambassadorial role for the club, despite being an active part of the squad, an active player in the squad even. Where do you see his role developing this season? And importantly, if he doesn't get into the team, do you see him being happy with that?
Yeah, look, it's where I see his role. I think he'll be on, when he's fit, he'll be on the bench, because his versatility makes him a great player to have on the bench, and we know what his influence is like around the club and in the dressing room. So I think that will be where he fits in. I kind of don't see where he's going to get into the team, even if we have a few injuries. Now, obviously, when we've got the African Cup of Nations, all that sort of stuff, that potentially changes it, because we will have a number of players away. But on a regular game, you can kind of go through the team now and go, okay, first choice and second choice in every position, can't you? And I actually don't think you'd put O'Nien, as it stands, into first or second choice in any of those positions. So look, barring a huge injury crisis or a raft of international call-ups that we have to play through, I don't see him getting a start. But, as I say, his versatility naturally makes him a great sub to have. So that's where I see him fitting in. Now, whether he's happy with that or not is a completely different matter altogether. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that one plays out, because I think there'll be part of him who wants to fight to play Premier League football. There'll be part of him, if he's coming off the bench to help see games out or to do whatever, I think he might actually be content with playing that role if he's getting on the field for 20 minutes here, quarter of an hour there, half an hour here.
For this season,
if he's not getting on,
anyways, yeah.
Yeah. If he's not getting on, then I think there's probably a question for him to answer. Now, I think his age, because I'd love him to stay around the club. I think he's brilliant for Sunderland Football Club. I think he's an absolute asset for us. And, as you say, if he's doing sponsor stuff and all that sort of thing, that, as a role of a club captain, I don't know if he's still officially club captain, or Xhaka took. Actually, I don't know that. Did Xhaka take club captain as well as team captain?
Didn't the club say something when Xhaka took the captaincy? Wasn't it in the announcement that there would be some sort of, after the transfer window, there would be some sort of announcement around a leadership group being formed and kind of who was part of it and stuff? Yeah. I think it was. I would have to get it up in front of us, but there was something along those lines in terms of, it'll be announced in due course or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's right. So look, how involved the club actually want him to be, or not, I think could affect how he kind of sees his future. And the club aren't daft, and they'll be wanting to put a path if they see potential in 09 having an off-field role at some stage in the future, which you can very feasibly see, can't you? You can see him be involved in coaching or what have you. It could be a case of where he's playing for the under-21s on the bench for the first team, and you kind of balance it like that. But the type of person that Luke O'Nien seems to be, and I've never bumped into him in Roker Park when he's been riding his bike, so I don't know. But the type of player or the person he comes across as is somebody who wants to play. He wants to play every game. Now, whether he'll want to play regularly in Championship as opposed to being a bit part player in the Premier League, only he can answer. But he's going to be 31 in November. They did give him a new contract, I think, in the summer, didn't they, for a couple of years?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there's obviously a desire for him to stick around and stay at the club. I've kind of got a feeling that we might get to January, and he's got a decision to make about whether he actually wants to go and play regularly in Championship, or whether he's content to stick around. And it kind of depends how the season's going as well, isn't it? If he can be around and sort of enjoy, because he's been there from that first game of the League One season against Charlton. He's been there all the way through our climb out of League One, through the Championship, to get us back to the Premier League. And I think there'll be a big part of him wants to kind of see that outcome, that success, and enjoy that success for a bit. How long that period of time is, it'll kind of depend on how much he desperately wants to play proper football. And if I had to put some money on it, I would say either come January or come the end of the season, he could well make a move to the Championship. But again, he could walk into the Championship as a first choice centre half for somebody, couldn't he? He's proven it. He's by far good enough. But you'll certainly want to get on the pitch for a few games in the Premier League with us anyway, won't you? So I think we'll enjoy seeing that before anything else happens.
Yeah, well, I was thinking that there as you were talking, kind of he'll have the pick of clubs. I would think that everyone in that league would love him in the squad. He's just everybody knows what kind of character he is, and I don't think there's many of them in football. So when you talk about having a decision to make, it might be a case where the club I can never see a situation where the club are pushing him towards the exit. I think the club will want him. The club will want him in the squad. If we finished, bloody hell, imagine we finished in the top 6 somehow. Like, it's never going to happen. Well, you never know. I'm not going to write us off completely, but let's just say that happened, right? In a mad world where that's a possibility. The club would still want Luke O'Nien to be a part of the club because I think his biggest influence isn't felt on the pitch. It's kind of the way he's set the standards off the pitch, the way he's been able to successfully integrate and link young players in with the old ones, the way that he puts an arm around new players and makes them understand what it means to be a Sunderland player. That's the kind of thing you can't buy. You can't go to Paris Saint-Germain, Atletico Madrid, RB Leipzig, Bayer Leverkusen and spend 20 million on that. That's just a quality that somebody has. And I mean, I would love him to see his career out with Sunderland. I never want him to go anywhere. I just can't help but wonder what the what the inner desire for him will be. And I think at the minute, I think at the minute, I think his desire immediately will be to play Premier League football at least a handful of times, because he's fought for a career in football. You know, this is a lad who got released by Watford and ended up in non-league. And how many thousands and thousands of players have done that and just fell away in the game? And because of the way he is as a person, he managed to make a proper go of it. He got himself a trial with Wickham. He got a contract with Wickham. He got a move to Sunderland. And the stars just aligned at the right time there. And, you know, Sunderland hopefully will never see us ever be a third-tier club again. But that chance to sign for Sunderland is once in a lifetime for a player like Luke O'Nien, and it happened. And then when he got here, he had to fight just to get on the pitch in League One. And he had to play a position that he'd never played before. And he lied to the manager about the fact he played there just so he could get a game at right back. And then it goes on and on and on. You know, you've got so many things there where you put a lot of his success down to just being mentally very, very strong. And for him to have gone through 8 years of that, to then just go, actually, nah, I would rather play football in the Championship. I just can't see it, if I'm honest. I think he's going to want to hang it out and see where it goes this season. And, you know, come the summer, Luke O'Nien might have played like 3 or 4 games, and he's like, at this stage of my career, I think I need to play football. But at least he could say that knowing he gave it a go and he was part of a Premier League Sunderland team. And so it's going to be interesting. I think it is something to talk about because we love him. We absolutely love him. But you just see what the club have done in terms of recruitment, and it's really tough to see not just him, but some of these other players. You know, even looking at Dennis Serkin, we've signed 2 left backs. Serkin's like O'Nien, going to be fit soon. You almost look at him and go, he's one of the players I looked at last season and went, Dennis Serkin's probably one of the more Premier League ready players we've got. Then you look, we've went and signed 2 left backs, and like Dan Neil, contract situation hasn't been resolved. Leo Hjelde is still here. He's not going to get many minutes, if any. Agilise, when he's fit, probably not going to play great. So like, there's a bunch of players there who are all in a similar boat. But O'Nien's just a very different case for me because of the sort of strong emotional ties to the club and the fact that he loves living here and he loves being a Sunderland player. It's that way and that desire, isn't it, to hang about and whether it's the best thing for his football career or not.
And look, it's different as well because O'Nien, you know, Serkin to a lesser extent, but O'Nien has been a regular in the team for however many seasons, hasn't he? Hjelde's kind of been on the bench here and there and come off and on. Elise is just, you know, struggled with injuries so much he's been unable to really establish himself, which has always been a great shame. And look, it'll completely depend on O'Nien. It's completely depend on O'Nien's desire to play first team football and whether that outweighs anything and everything else. Now, he might.
As a sports fan, I have to confess, sometimes the game gets kind of boring. That's when I unfold my Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7 and use multi-window viewing on its large screen. Boring game? I'm checking out my fantasy baseball league at the same time. Score still 1-0? I'm replying to emails in the other window, scoring points with the boss. Semifinals finally getting exciting? I'm buying tickets to the finals and booking my flights. Can your phone do that?
The new Galaxy Z Fold 7. Get yours at Samsung.com.
Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contracts. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
For a limited time at McDonald's, get a Big Mac extra value meal for $8. That means 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun, and medium fries, and a drink. We may need to change that jingle.
Prices and participation may vary.
Be of the opinion that he's at this stage of his career, say he's 31 in November. You might go, well, look, I've played League One football, I've played Championship football. At this stage of my career, I'm actually really happy to spend the next 2 or 3 years on and off the bench, playing in cups, you know, appearing like that, and enjoying this period of time, training with better players, learning from better players. Because the other thing I think is important, and you know, something that we haven't talked about with O'Nien, is, his off-field stuff in terms of he's very involved in like the psychology of sport and football. Wants to get into coaching, wants to do all that, and does he see the opportunity of actually working alongside the likes of Granit Xhaka, Ronaldo, all of these experienced international players, as actually adding something more to his overall perception and views of football than going back into the Championship and playing another 2 or 3 seasons in the Championship? He's done that. He's already done that. He's accomplished that. So look, it really, really depends on how he sees his future, and also as how the club sees his future. The club might offer him a great contract. Go, like they've talked about when Xhaka signed. He's a bit of a plan for you for the next 5 to 10 years at the club. He is where we see you fitting in, and there's probably an awful lot more weight and a lot more appeal in that than getting a 2-year contract with a random Championship club. So there's that bit to it. What I would equate it to, and I think this is again a really important consideration when people think about this, is when Kevin Ball left the club. So very similar situation. We're in the Premier League. Kevin Ball was kind of struggling to get his place, and he was on the bench and off it. And he joined Fulham. Paul Bracewell had gone the season before. I think it was Bracewell manager or assistant manager then at the time when Ball went to Fulham, but I can't remember.
Assistant, wasn't he?
I think he was.
Was he not assistant to Keegan, or have I made that up?
He was, but then he took over from Keegan when Keegan left.
Right.
So I can't remember when he was, but regardless, it's not important. But Bally went to Fulham to play regular football. And we kept going all right for a period of time because the club was in good shape. We had good players who were playing well. But in 12 months' time or so, things started to kind of tail off. And the club descended into, an absolute mess when you had, the relegation season under Howard Wilkinson. I think at that time, Bally had come back as youth team coach or head of the academy by then I think it was Howard Wilkinson actually brought him back. Because to be fair to Howard Wilkinson, he realised the impact Kevin Ball could have and should have on the club in terms of standards and all that sort of stuff. But I always think that decline was as much to do with Ball leaving, his presence departing the club, than it was about how bad Howard Wilkinson was as a manager or anything else. So I think, people can't overlook the importance of Luke O'Nien being a presence at the football club and the importance of what he's contributed off the field as well as on it over the past 4 or 5, 6 seasons, because it's been huge. And, if you cast your mind back to that relegation season under Simon Grayson and then Chris Coleman, the standards on the field and off the field were appalling. The group of players were appalling. And Luke O'Nien has slowly but surely established himself as somebody who can set those standards and inspire the other players to reach those standards, meet those standards. He does work with the younger players, the youth team players, to help educate them in Sunderland and the expectation of the other players and all that sort of stuff. And I just think if you take that out of the club, you're risking a hell of a lot. So it's a very long way of saying I hope he stays for a long time.
No, but you made a really interesting point there about Bally. I hadn't even thought about that. But yeah, I mean, it is there to kind of compare because similar length of time. Really, what was Bally at the club, like 10 years, maybe?
Just short of, 9.5.
Yeah, a little bit older than Luke O'Nien though when he left, but regardless, had kind of been with the club for a very long time, and even to this day is still seen as one of the greatest captains the club's ever had. You watch them Premier Passions documentaries and you see him in the changing room, putting his nose tape on and snotting everywhere and telling people to get stuck in and we're going to be together and all these things. You see with Bally and you're like, yeah, I'd love to be part of his team. And you're right, you kind of, you see how quickly it descended under Peter Reid. And it wasn't just Bally. A lot of the big, sort of more experienced players kind of, when they disappeared, it changed, didn't it? You throw Niall Quinn into the mix. I know Quinny was kind of, they kept him hanging on a bit. There's actually been a piece on this, on the site this week, talking a little bit about that, hasn't it? About how we kind of just, kept going back to a 34-year-old Niall Quinn to sort the job out and stuff. But there were a bunch of players in the squad at that time who, for all intents and purposes, were the leaders of the dressing room, were the ones setting the standards. And once they go, you've got to find an accurate way of replacing that void. And it's a very, very different situation. I think Luke O'Nine's different than any sort of leader we've ever had. I don't think we've ever had somebody at the club who in terms of mindset, is as switched on as he is.
Yeah.
But I certainly don't want to see him going anywhere. I'm more interested to just see how his role evolves. I think that's what we talked a lot about here. Kind of, it's not about how he's sort of his importance to the club decreases as a result of more players coming in and perhaps replacing them in the squad. It's more a case of how can we ensure that we still get the best from Luke O'Nien when he's not going to be playing as much. So I am really interested to see how that all works out.
Where I hope it goes, as I say, I think he'll be on the bench for large parts of the season when he's fit. But you can kind of see him doing that role that the likes of Paul McShane and Tom Huddleston have done for Man United, where they're the overage player in the under-23s or under-21s or whatever it is. They're like coaching them and developing them, but they're actually on the field to help the younger players come through. And I think, especially if we kind of continue on the recruitment path that we're on, in terms of bringing younger foreign players into the club, developing them, all that sort of stuff, to have somebody like O'Nien in the dressing room, on the field, all that sort of stuff with them, as well as the young players who come through the academy from the younger age groups, I think that would be so incredibly valuable for us as a football club to develop those players before they actually hit the first team. So when they come into the first team, they absolutely So again, if you draw a parallel with Borley coming back as director of the academy or whoever his official job title was, kind of a similar input without doing that exact same role. You're working with the young players and getting them ready to come into the first team at Sunderland. And look, I think if you're going to choose a path for Luke O'Nien without him having any say into it at all, that would probably be a great path for him to go down.
Yeah, and that's something that can develop over a number of years, can't it? Yeah,
exactly.
I do think it's going to be an interesting year for him. I think the club will love to keep him. I think we've talked about it a fair bit there, but there's so many places where you can go, I can see O'Nien doing that, and I think you're right. It would be in some sort of mentorship, coaching, leadership role that doesn't involve playing as much. Or I quite like that idea of him being part of the 21 squad. It's daft because I love him. I want him to play. I love him. I've said it before on here. He's my favourite ever Sunderland player. I think he has overtaken the likes of. It was always Quinny or Julio for me, but Luke O'Nien's took that mantle for me, and I want him to play for Sunderland as long as possible. But we can't deny reality. We can't deny the path the club's taken, and the fact that we seem to have skipped forward 2 or 3 years over one summer. It's like, you can't ignore that. But I think the fact he signed a new deal is recognition that the club see value in him. So let's see what happens. Let's see what happens with Luke. I'm praying he's still got a lot longer to go with Sunderland, and he's not going to be going anywhere anytime soon. Anyways, mate, when at the top of this, I said we haven't got much to talk about. We're 50 minutes in. We're still yapping. And I've kind of had to cut it there. There's other things I wanted to talk about, and we didn't get round to it. But thank you very much, listeners. It's been nice catching up with you again after a week away. And likewise, Martin, thank you very much, mate.
Thank you, Gav.
Yes. Thank you to everyone for listening, as you always do, every single day. We are actually in a bit of a transition period of the pod, so you might notice some different adverts and things at the start of our podcasts from Sports Social. We are now part of the Sports Social network, and you can check them out if you want to know more about what Sports Social do. But that's a recent development for us as a podcast, so we're looking forward to seeing how that goes. Over on rotereport.sbnation.com, all week, leading up to that Palace game, we'll have stuff on the website from fans just like you, chatting about Sunderland FC every single day this week. Of course, there will be another podcast every day. If you haven't already listened to it, On This Week was out on Monday. Over the weekend, we had pods with Scott Wilson. It's not Scott Wilson. Jonathan Wilson. It was meant to be Scott Wilson, but Scott we changed our Wilsons around. Scott was meant to be on. We might get Scott on later in the week. Yes, Jonathan Wilson. Apologies, Jonathan, if you are listening. Was on with Chris this week. We've also had Dougie Critchley on from Sky Sports. Loads of stuff reacting to the transfer window that we think probably still aged pretty well, given there's been no games. So if you haven't caught up with all that good stuff, make sure that you do. Just need me to say thank you very much. We'll catch you on the next one. See you later.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.